Ladies and gentlemen, Barry C here with another cryptocurrency video, and XRP very close to skyrocketing. We are going to see an alt season very soon. But people are getting frustrated, they're getting annoyed, they're sick of the market going down, then trading sideways. And I'm going to put this all in perspective, and I want to share kind of my personal journey because I think it gives people the right mindset, particularly if people have only been in crypto the last 4 or 5 years. People got into crypto around 2020 or 2021, then they've only known XRP to really be in a 4-year cycle. They haven't seen the market grow and evolve, especially when we talk about prices like $1,000 per XRP. Immediately people are like, well, that could never happen. And the people who say that have clearly not been in crypto long enough to understand. And the best way to look at this is, in 2016, when I was first buying Bitcoin, back then it was like $330 a coin. And there was nobody back then who even thought the possibility of Bitcoin hitting $100,000 per coin, let alone 20,000 or 30,000 or 50,000. Because you look at Bitcoin, you thought, well, $330. It didn't make sense. And then sure enough, we've seen it surpass the $100,000 price point. It was the same thing in 2017 with Ethereum at $10. Nobody thought it would go to $2,000 a coin. And that's kind of what we're expecting to see with XRP. A similar type of price movement from, $10 to $2,000, or in this case, we're talking about $3 to $1,000. It's all about time and patience. And it's very easy for people to look at crypto now and go, well, yeah, Bitcoin, of course it's $100,000. Or of course Ethereum went to $2,000. That makes sense. They're looking at it after the fact. But they weren't there holding for 7 or 8 years and going, well, I'm holding and, it's very cheap now and I'm going to wait 7 or 8 years until it goes to 100,000 or 2,000 or whatever it may be. It's the exact same thing with XRP. People are looking at the immediate price right now and they're going, well, there's no way it could go to $1,000 a coin. Now, the only way that would even be possible is essentially crypto as a whole would just have to stop right now. As of today, it would mean that the crypto market's not going to grow, it's not going to evolve, we're not going to see more attention and more money on the crypto market as a whole. It means that there'll be no finance-based cryptos that get adopted into banks and financial institutions around the world. It means that banks and financial institutions around the world aren't going to adopt blockchain technology. It'll be one of the few industries and one of the few sectors that exist that don't embrace blockchain technology. There's a lot of things that have to happen for XRP to never move in price. And I've mentioned this in the previous video, but I think it's really important to understand this, which is what's more than likely? Is the scenario I just laid out more than likely, or is the reality of it that the market will continue to grow and evolve, that more and more money will come into the market, especially from institutional levels and institutions? Because we already see the ETFs happening, we already see more and more attention on crypto to be utilized worldwide. From a presidential level, we see interest in crypto, specifically projects like XRP. And banks and financial institutions will absolutely use blockchain and crypto technology. That is more likely the scenario. And we've seen that play out since 2016 until now. Back in 2016, it was all about this new asset class that was going to be something entirely different than the existing banking and financial system. A new type of way to actually not just make some money, but just something different to what was the status quo. And actually back in 2016, there was nobody talking about $100,000 Bitcoin. People were still trying to figure out how crypto was going to have a place outside of, places like the dark web or the select few who knew about crypto. It wasn't really a mainstream idea. But we've seen as the years go on and on and on, crypto is rapidly becoming a part of the mainstream. It's rapidly becoming a viable asset class, and is rapidly becoming something that institutions want to become a part of. And that just takes time. And that's why I find it absolutely ridiculous when people say, well, XRP will never go that high in price. It just takes time. It's the same as people, like I said, back in 2016 and 2017 saying, oh, Bitcoin and Ethereum, They'll never go to those prices. It wasn't even a question to ask back then. It was in nobody's psyche or mindset. They weren't even asking the question or even thinking about the notion of a $100,000 Bitcoin or a $2,000 Ethereum. It was only as the market started moving rapidly and it looked more and more likely that those cryptos were heading that way, that's when people started floating the idea of these type of price points. And of course, once people started talking about those type of price points, everybody labeled them as idiots or insane or that would never happen. It didn't matter what the negative narrative or the negative messaging was. The main sentiment was it would never happen until it did. And I've mentioned that in previous videos as well with XRP. XRP will be cheap until it's not. XRP will never reach $1,000 until it does. And that's why these, negative narratives or these narratives that are put out there, they can actually be quite catastrophic because people can fall into that mindset of going, well, I can't possibly see how XRP could do that, could hit those prices. But just because you can't fathom it doesn't mean it can't happen. And that's why it's so important to look at where crypto started from 2016 until now. Look at where XRP started in 2017. It was worth less than 1 cent a coin. And back then, there was no one talking about a $3 XRP because it was worth less than 1 cent. Maybe $1 would have been the exciting price point. And then in 2018, it flips Ethereum and Bitcoin and it goes to over $3. It's like $3.80 all-time high. That's a remarkable skyrocketing price. And just as people were proven wrong back then, they're going to be proven wrong over the next couple of years. And so when people say things like XRP's done, that crypto is not going to keep growing and evolving, that we're not going to see an alt season, these are the same things I've heard every single year. And these people are proven wrong every step of the way. And it's easy to verify this. You can go back and look at the crypto charts. Look at Bitcoin from 2016 until now. You can see how it's clearly defied all those negativity, all that price point discussion. People saying, oh, it couldn't possibly do this. It's the exact same thing we see with XRP. The amount of people who have said that XRP would never go to certain price points. Good example of this was through the bear market from 2021 until 2024. People were saying XRP was dead, XRP wouldn't skyrocket again, it wouldn't go past $1. And then we get to November of 2024, and sure enough, we see that happen. We see XRP skyrocket beyond $1 to $2, to $2.50, $2.60, $2.70. And at the start of 2025, we saw a $3 XRP. So those people have already been proven wrong in that instance. And it makes no difference to the people who now say, well, there's no way XRP could go to $100 or $1,000. Those people will be proven wrong as well. As I've said, if you can see Bitcoin go from $300 to $100,000, if Ethereum can go from $10 to $2,000, then there's nothing stopping XRP to go from $3 to $1,000. Nothing stopping it. And I'm not even talking about an alt season cycle. I'm talking about a utility run. I'm talking about that type of price action happening when banks and financial institutions around the world are utilizing XRP. Now, it's interesting, when you look at Bitcoin, it took the Bitcoin ETFs to help propel Bitcoin to the $100,000 price point. Ethereum didn't really need the ETFs to propel it from $10 to $2,000. For the majority of those sort of price action, it was the alt seasons that propelled both those cryptos to the much higher price points. So for me, when I look at XRP, I think it's a lot more realistic to say, hey, in an alt season, we could see $5, $10, $20. But I think when we talk about higher price points, like $100 to $1,000, maybe beyond, to me, it takes a utility run. And, you try to break it down like that and people still have a problem with it. And that's why I find it so ridiculous and kind of hilarious, because people who, once again, push these narratives, they don't understand crypto. They don't understand where crypto has started, where it's going. They're locked into the idea of essentially like a retail investor. They're looking at the 4-year cycle. They're not taking a step back and going, well, if we're talking every bank around the world, all financial institutions, if we're talking about changing the way we conduct finance, but working within the existing financial framework, then of course XRP is going to skyrocket to much higher prices. There's no way it's staying $10 or $20 or $50. And $1,000 isn't that far-fetched. Not when you think about it in a logical, common sense way. If you combine the fact that the crypto market is of course going to grow and evolve and more money is going to come into it, the more it becomes adopted on an everyday level. And it doesn't even matter about specifically XRP. If more and more people want access to Bitcoin and Ethereum and other cryptos, if more and more money is coming into the space and staying in the space, then the whole market moves in a positive upward trajectory. That's a good thing. Now, if you combine that with a utility run, when we see banks and financial institutions finally embracing and adopting blockchain technology and crypto, well, those banks and financial institutions aren't going to stop and go, okay, well, we're going to wait for someone to invent a crypto that we can utilize. They're going to turn to the crypto that they have successfully trialed since 2017, and that crypto is XRP. And of course, once they announce they're going to adopt XRP, it'll probably skyrocket close to $50 or $100. They'll have to trial it. They'll have to make sure that XRP and the XRP blockchain can handle the world's finances. It may be a partnership with XRP, also utilizing a couple of other projects like Ondo or XDC or XLM or HBAR. That's a reality as well. But then once the banks and financial institutions are just utilizing it daily, when it becomes the new norm, XRP will skyrocket beyond $100. It'll easily be $1,000. And then once it's up there, that's it. There's no more volatility. There's no more 4-year cycle for XRP. There's no more 50% market correction into a bear market so people can try and buy it cheaply before the next alt season. And I don't think people realize that, because once again, I think they're looking at XRP through the traditional, typical lens of the 4-year cycle, where everybody's waiting for that small window of opportunity, which is the alt season, where we see really amazing price points and then people take their profits. When we're talking about utility run, we're saying goodbye to that. Essentially, once XRP is being utilized on a daily basis and we're seeing millions and billions and trillions of dollars flow directly through XRP, then you're no longer talking about extreme volatility. You're talking about XRP being a lot more expensive, and it'll essentially stay up there. You won't see that volatility. You won't have access to cheap entry points anymore. And that's why it's so important to understand how crypto has grown and evolved. The same way people weren't ready to even think about $100,000 Bitcoin back in 2016, that's where we are right now with XRP. People can say as much as they want that XRP could never do this and never do that, and that'll be the case until it changes. And then what's going to happen is that people will look back on XRP where we are right now, and they'll say the exact same thing people always say. It's the same thing they say when we talk about Bitcoin back in 2016. They go, oh, I wish I had those prices. I wish I had a Bitcoin price below $1,000. Or I wish I had an Ethereum price below $50. XRP will be the exact same thing. I wish I had access to XRP back when it was $2, $3, $10 even, $20. That's what people will say. It's the same way as in November 2024, when XRP went from 50 cents to over $2 a coin. People were saying, well, I wish I'd bought more. I wish I'd done things differently. I wish I could have gone back to 50-cent XRP and, added to my bags. It'll be the same thing with a $1,000 XRP. Now, ladies and gents, this is not financial advice. It's the perspective of someone who's been in crypto since 2016. I've seen how the market has grown and evolved. I've seen how crypto has moved more and more into the mainstream. And people have gone from thinking about it as this volatile asset that essentially buying it is extreme levels of gambling, that you only get into crypto to essentially lose your money. People now look at it as a viable, investable asset. There's a lot more confidence in crypto in 2025 than there was in 2016. And look, my attitude towards XRP hasn't changed since I discovered it in 2017. I know it's the number one crypto in finance. I know it's going to change the financial landscape forever. We're just waiting for utility to come to XRP. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to see amazing price action in the upcoming alt season. It doesn't mean a $10 XRP or a $20 XRP isn't amazing. But it also means that we are heading towards an eventual utility run. And when that happens, once again, you're saying goodbye to the volatility within XRP. And then everybody can figure out what their plan is. Whether you're in a position to take some profits when XRP goes to $10 or $20, or whether you want to wait for the utility run because maybe you don't have as big an XRP bag. Maybe you need a $100 XRP or a $1,000 XRP, and that's great as well. Everybody has their own plan, but the most important thing is don't give up on that plan. Don't let people shake you out. Don't look at a $2 or a $3 XRP and think to yourself, this is getting frustrating or annoying. Because we're going to see a utility run happen a lot sooner than people anticipate. And you don't want to be on the sidelines thinking to yourself, you know what, I gave up. And then a year later or 2 years later or 3 years later, XRP is now worth $1,000. That's why it's so important to stay strong, stay focused, and be ready for exciting times, short-term, mid-term, and long-term, with XRP. Now, ladies and gents, as previously stated, none of this is financial advice. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you're curious about the other cryptos I hold outside of XRP, consider becoming a Patreon. Click the link in the description below, head across to my Patreon page, and consider becoming a Barry C VIP. There you'll have access to all my cryptos, as well as my buy, sell, and take profit signals in real time.